Now we're going to have our next guest speaker. He is the director leads at Cyber's security consulting organization across Europe, Middle East, Africa, to Russia. As a part of Cisco Customer Experience Organization, he has over 35 years of experience in technology with 25 years in security, of which in the last 15 has been at Cisco. He will be speaking about automating security responses. Let's give a big round of applause for Mr. David Williamson.
Good morning, everyone. I'm here to talk to you about automating security response. I'd like to thank my competitor from CrowdStrike for talking about a very important topic, which is the need to be faster at detection and response to any kind of attempt or breach to your organization. And security automation, orchestration, threat intelligence that goes around it, the tools and technologies that we use to provide SOAR. Gartner talks a lot about this. This is the number of Gartner's white paper report on SOAR, with one of the starting points in this discussion around what you need to be doing. It's more than just a product. There are many good SOAR product vendors on the market. I'll talk about some of them briefly later, and some of the complementary technologies as well. But in order to effectively implement security orchestration, automation, and response, there's a lot more to it. The reason we need to do this is that the volume of incidents we're seeing coming into our security operations functions is just mushrooming. And it's getting to a point where it's almost impossible to provide enough coverage and response. There's too much noise to be able to focus on what really matters. So back to the chap from CrowdStrike and the need to try and do this in 60 minutes or less. Well, it depends on your adversary, your threat model. It depends on the actors that are looking to attack you and to come towards you. But ultimately, you need to do something to relieve the pressure on your security operations functions. So our goal with SOAR is to do exactly that, to free analysts' time so they can do more important, more valuable work for your organization, be that threat hunting or active investigations. So part of the reason we're doing this isn't just workload as well, it's also to improve the automation. The response time that you now need to operate at is to counter your adversaries. We're not the only ones with software tools. In fact, the marketplace within the dark web for hostile actors and for criminals, let alone state actors, is such that there are fully automated attack tools that will provide response times for navigation, for research, for reconnaissance and exploitation, such that you will not be able to respond with a human being at a SIM console trying to implement some kind of controls. You need to reduce that time to detect and respond to a software time. You can't bring people to a software fight. You'll lose. You have to automate some of this. In order to know what to block, what to automate using these SOAR platforms, you have to build your default risk profile. What is your organization's appetite for risk? At what point do you say, this is acceptable, this should automatically be blocked? We have a number of different factors that influence what the risk profile is for your organization, but also for specific targets and data assets and repositories within your organization. Only you know what those are, what's valuable to you, what an adversary or an attacker would find useful and want to come after your organization to breach and to either exfiltrate or compromise. Once you understand what those different assets are, you can now start to build some kind of facility where you can identify the risk and build defenses against them. And those factors could include things like the geographic location of the asset, the attacker, the vector, what traffic flow. There are a number of different things that will help inform your decision on whether to block or whether to permit a traffic flow or an access attempt. Understanding that risk profile and tolerance, as I say, is different for each organization, but it's critical that you have that. Without that, you don't know what to automate and where to start. People still stop. People still hesitate about automating. They worry. if I automate this and it goes wrong, I block something that should be allowed, particularly if it's from a senior member of staff of my organization, there'll be problems. I need to be more cautious. Well, the reality is that you already automate so many things. We do patch management. We update versions of our operating systems. We have other software tools that provide updates to firewalls and so on. So there are risks that a block could go wrong. The trick really is, how do you reduce that risk to a minimum? How do you accept that automation of a remediation, a patch, or an update is acceptable? If you look at your existing tools, as I say, you already do a lot of this automation. It's taking this concept so you are comfortable with the risk of a failure into your security operations. So overcoming that hesitancy is about understanding, quantifying that risk of a bad outcome. Now, I appreciate we all want good outcomes. We want all of the controls we put in place to work perfectly. We also want, if something doesn't work, it doesn't cause any problems. Well, that's perhaps the key to this. We need to have increased confidence in our decision making. Better input data, the process itself, and the application of that control. Those different parts of the process. Making a good decision, having that work reliably, very predictably, consistently in your organization. That last bullet point, if it doesn't work, that the consequences are bearable. That a block doesn't cause irreparable damage to your organization or causes an issue with an important transaction or operation of an important person. Now, this is a model which is developed out of Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Laboratory. This is not Cisco research or value. This was developed at a US government institution by people who come from US government agencies. And the concept is called the principle of low regret, that if something happens and it doesn't work out the way you wanted, it doesn't matter so much. You didn't have a lot of regret. It helps you build confidence by iteratively protecting your organization and implementing controls that allow you to defend against attacks, based upon your default risk profile. So that middle point, a trivial or acceptable negative impact. You've automated a response, it meets your default risk profile, you've blocked the attack or whatever the event was, and it wasn't an intended outcome. But the risk to you and the outcome for you is acceptable. You can keep repeating this. If you can calculate that potential for regret, the risk of it going wrong, versus the benefit of mitigating the risk, then you can decide what to automate. Now you know where to start in that process. And it's a little counterintuitive. Most people will start looking at security automation and the tools in a way to focus on the things that are taking most time, most visible, most risk. So these are the things which are towards the right-hand side. You have a lot of potential regret and perhaps not so much benefit, but a lot of traffic, a lot of noise. Don't automate those. Leave them alone. And the things at the top right are very important, but also quite risky. Leave those for the time being. Focus on the things which have a potential for regret is quite low, but you'll get a lot of benefit from. The top left-hand side. I appreciate that's counterintuitive, but this helps you build the confidence that the controls and the techniques you're putting in place to mitigate an attack work. They work reliably and consistently and don't cause any issues in your organization. Each one of these that you automate, you'll save a little bit of time, a little bit of load from your security operations people. Less load on them allows them to focus on other things. If you wanted to add a third dimension to this, and my PowerPoint skills are not good enough to draw that, then you could add confidence into this as well. How confident are you in these set of controls and your organization's ability to operate them? But even if you just simply go with benefit versus regret, it'll really help you make the decision what and when to automate for a security response. To that point about how to improve confidence, you need a risk scoring mechanism. So I'll talk about some of the other vendors. This is not a Cisco sales pitch deck. This is very much around different tools and vendors and things you may wish to use. Actually, I've seen both Threat Quotient and Intel 471 that are in the hall next door, both very interesting vendors. For full disclosure, both Threat Quotient and Flashpoint are Cisco investments companies. So we have a financial stake in these companies, even though they're not actually wholly owned or part of Cisco. But using a Threat Quotient threat intelligence platform, others such as Anomaly or Threat Connect and so on, then you feed that with open source intelligence and potentially, if you wish, and I would strongly recommend you do, commercial feeds, such as some of those listed here. ThreatQ we like strongly, not just because of our relationship with them and the history of the company, but also because they are solely focused as a threat intelligence platform, and they have a customizable scoring system that helps you build out a model for a decision point in that tip that can feed your SOAR. So you can do a lot of the heavy lifting, the calculation for what needs to be done as a numeric score that feeds into your SOAR platform. And these are some of the products, the SOAR tools you may wish to look at. There are many, many on the market. I put CyberSponse at the beginning of this list for one reason. It's the one which my organization, Cisco's Security Professional Services team, has the most experience with. When we looked at the market and evaluated different SOAR platforms and tools, we found CyberSponse was the one we liked the most for the use cases that our customers see. Obviously, other vendors, Palo Alto, Splunk and others have done acquisitions in this space, but CyberSponse is an independent company, and they have a very effective, very reliable engine for implementing security response. Plus, they have an excellent user interface to build those different cases and dry run them and test them in the organization. Adding in that threat intelligence, both those commercial feeds we talked about, but also things like the Cisco OpenDNS Investigate API and our other threat feeds can really help enrich that. These are interrogative APIs, though. These are not JSON or XML feeds of data. These are things you interactively have to use. They're a little bit more sophisticated to integrate. But they would give you a great amount of information to help you make smart decisions about what to automate and when to trigger a control. These technical controls you can apply directly in the platform, in the SOAR tools themselves, like CyberSponse. Works very effectively. If you have a larger scale network and require the very highest level carrier-grade reliability, then Cisco's Network Services Orchestrator platform will do that. I think that is for particular use cases or for a high-risk setup. Now, as we've talked about low regret, you shouldn't be doing that to start with. You should focus very much on the lower regret, higher benefit automation and move to these in time. But if you already have Cisco NSO elsewhere for example, network automation functions, it works very well for security as well. There are other things that your SOAR tool can do and your SOAR platform can do when set up with this model, with this integration, with the threat intelligence and the tips. The case management part is very important. Different tools provide case management for your security operations functions. We particularly like those in CyberSponse. Phantom and Demisto are pretty good as well. It quickly becomes that SOAR is the central point of action in your organization. Excuse me. If you haven't implemented SOAR, you're using purely a SIM platform like Splunk, Exabeam, ArcSight, that generally becomes the main console people use. When you implement SOAR, it very quickly shifts away to be a complementary tool for data gathering, analysis, for just log aggregation. And the workflow that is part of SOAR with the automated response and the graded ability to escalate from that tool to other information security professionals in your organization becomes much more valuable and much more productive. It also feeds into reporting tools like Tableau as a general dashboard tool, Panacea, which is another Cisco Investments company specializing in security dashboards and asset register. So you can then provide real-time metrics and dashboards to executives on how effective your cybersecurity operations functions are based upon what you're actually seeing directly coming out of automated tooling. Fully automated end-to-end, available with near real-time low latency. Pretty impressive when you see it running. That's it. I've tried to keep it focused on the different spaces around SOAR, things you can do to help improve your security operations. I'll be very happy to take any questions out at the Cisco booth, which is just out of the door on your left. And if anybody wishes to have a copy of this presentation, more than welcome to have that. Thank you.